Anyone in here who doesn't know who I am. I'm Krista Rumage. I'm an instructor in the psychology department. I teach all of our lifespan development classes. I've been teaching gender, several other things, and I am a little over halfway through my PhD in cognitive psychology. So, I was actually, yeah.
Are you a feminist?
Yes.
What does it mean to be a feminist?
So get ready to cover that. It's a very good question. What actually got me thinking about this is something really bizarre. I have a now 6-year-old son, who is on the autism spectrum. And I realized that his diagnosis of autism affected me much less than the idea of raising a little girl and letting her play with princesses and things. I mean, like, it literally took us. She was over a year old before she had anything princessy. It was her second Christmas, and my parents got her the Little People's Princess Castle. Up until that point, I have been avoiding it completely, because it's like, as a feminist mother, we cannot expose our child to this. And then she got the Little People's Princess Castle, and she was in love. And it made me really think about, as a parent, what exactly was I doing? Had I been approaching this the right way or not? Now, at this point, she's 2.5. She went through a period where she called herself Princess Sophia to anyone who would ask. This morning when I left the house, she was wearing her Elsa nightgown from Frozen. She has princess posters on her door. She has every princess people. She has every princess Barbie. She loves them. And we've kind of embraced it. And that made me really think, what exactly does it mean to be a feminist parent? Why should we care? How does this matter? And that's really where this came from. Feminism is simply this: the belief that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities. It is nothing more, it is nothing less. There are bloggers out there who think, there's one out of Lexington that I have some issue with, who really believes that feminism is a dirty, evil word and that women are treated the exact same as men and we don't need to care. We're not. And that's important. So just knowing the definition is a very important part of understanding feminism. It just means we think that males and females should be treated equally and have equal opportunities.
Isn't that kind of hard to implement with all the gender roles and things like that in society?
That is exactly where it gets hard. But it's more about where people's stereotypes are of what gender roles should be rather than what they actually are. There's some really interesting, this is not the regular PowerPoint, is it? I forgot my smart thing's closed. What I want to talk about before I talk about what it really means to be a feminist parent, I think we have to understand why it matters if we do or do not have feminist parenting. And part of that is going to be considering some of the statistics. We all know, you probably know this statistic right here. Women make on average 77 cents per male dollar. There are some people who say this is completely inaccurate and women are paid the same. There are others who say this is the way it is totally, and they're both really wrong. It's accurate yet inaccurate. Women do make less money than men. Overall, it is about 77 cents per dollar. Where people argue this is not true is that women don't have the same jobs as men because they don't want them and therefore their jobs pay them less. Well, if we look at women who are in the same jobs as men, they're still getting paid less. So there is still a wage gap. It may not be this 23 cents for everyone. It may be bigger. It may be smaller, but it doesn't get much smaller if you look nationally, and I forgot to grab that statistic. The state with the lowest difference, it's still somewhere in the 80 cents range. It's in like 85, 86 cents. That statistic just came out. As of 2014, women hold 4.6 positions, 4.6% of Fortune 500 CEO positions, 4.6% of Fortune 100 CEO positions, 8% are top executives in the S&P 500. That's a very small percentage. They make less than 18%, make 18% less than their male counterparts. People will tell you that this is because they have less qualifications or something to this line. As we start talking about education, we'll see where this argument falls apart. About 59% of women over the age of 16 work outside the home in some way, shape, or fashion. A majority of us do work. We also, at this point in time, one good statistic, we have a lower unemployment rate right now. Mainly because a lot of the work that women do does involve some sort of educational training. That is where less of the layoffs have been rather than in the more physical labor workforce, which is more dominated by men. So really one of the first times in history, we do see women having less unemployment. So there's our positive to look at. If we look at our occupations from 1983 to 2008, yes, we jumped in accounting. Not very much in airplanes, a bit in architects, a bit in mechanics. Computer programmers went down 13%. Dental assistants, still dominated by females. Firefighters up a little. Interestingly, my husband's in computers. I always use him as an example because the factory where he works, they have more female employees, they pay equally. In his computer science department, there's 4 people, 2 of them are female. And both those females are programmers, which is an unusual statistic. Women are not jumping into these male-dominated fields, and in fact, in a few of them, we're seeing the numbers drop even more. When we think about what men and women look for in a job, we do have things we value more. Women prefer recognition, being able to work with people, having a commute. With job benefits, often women prefer a bit more of a flexible schedule than men. Women are primary caregivers of children a lot of times. And so we do often look for a job that will allow us to be able to miss here and there to care for our children. Men are more concerned about working in solitude, earnings, challenge. I'm lucky I live in a family where my husband takes more sick days for the kids than I do, because I have less variability. But he's willing to do that, and he works somewhere where that's allowed. When we think about women in the workforce, these are some of the issues we run into. Glass ceilings. There's a lot of barriers that are preventing women and minority men and women from being able to reach the same goals, the same levels of employment. I forgot to write down the name of it, but there was actually a lawsuit in the last 15 years brought against a company for not giving a woman a job as a partner simply because they viewed her negatively for having the same skills as the men. She won her case. Women don't get sent higher, and a lot of times what's interesting is when we're talking about pay and hiring and promotion, companies will say, you know, we don't know if we can hire a woman and pay her this because she has kids to care for and she may need to miss and we may not get our money's worth. But on the opposite end, they'll give a father the raise without hesitating because he has a family to care for. He has kids he needs to be able to provide for. The difference is they assume that he won't miss where she will. The other issue is something called a glass elevator. What's really interesting is males in female-dominated professions tend to get raises quicker. They tend to be promoted more quickly and more easily. So in things like education, even though you see more female teachers, you may see more males in positions of power because it's easier for them to get promoted. Human resources, 70% of human resource managers in our country are women. The male human resource managers make 47% more. That's a bad number, isn't it? That's a horrid number. There's an inequality here. There's an inequality here. So what do we mean when we talk about sex and gender and all this? Sex is purely a biological designation. It simply means penis, vagina. What were you born with? What we are talking about is gender. Gender is the sense of being male or female, how you feel, your characteristics. In our culture, we treat those two things as being synonymous and interchangeable. I do it myself, and I try to catch myself. But we'll say sex where we mean gender, and we'll say gender where we mean sex. But they're not the same. And in fact, what can be really interesting is to know that there are multiple cultures that have more than 2 genders. For instance, the Lakota Indians in this country have one called Berdache. In the Balkans, they have multiple genders. I don't do Spanish very well. Huachiton, Mexico, there's the Mutes. There was even a news story out recently about a group, and I forgot where it was, where there's more than one gender. Mm-hmm.
With the Gay Straight Alliance on the website, there is an index, and there are 25 different gender identifications that are recognized.
Awesome.
We're getting better.
We're getting better. Facebook is allowing you to not have to pick a gender anymore, which is great. But what comes into play and why it can become difficult, gender is a culturally determined concept. What it means to have a gender is determined by each culture, which means your gender growing up in this country may be looked at differently if you grew up in one of these other places. They may consider it differently. In Mexico, for instance, these are men who have a very feminine look to them. They often take on female roles of like childcare. In the Balkans, they're women who take on male roles. We put a very strict limit, and this starts to influence how we look at children starting from before they're ever born. Where do gender guidelines start? Well, what happens when you're pregnant? What's the first thing people ask you? What are you having? Is it a boy or a girl? What are you having? Is it a boy or a girl? Is it a boy or a girl? Is it a boy or a girl? Everyone is obsessed. And if you have friends who don't find out what they're having, most people flip out. Okay, I found out what I was having because I just could not handle the surprise. I needed to know. I have several friends who didn't find out. We don't see that much anymore. People just are obsessed with it. And then we start thinking about the names that we're going to name our children. And we get concerned, will people think they're a boy or a girl if I give them this name? Names matter. There's a great story, Forbes printed it, it's been a while back, about a man named Kim. And my husband's boss is a man named Kim. A man named Kim who was leaving his job because he felt he'd gotten as far as he could, sent out his resume, nothing, looks at it, notice it says Kim on it, adds the word Mr. in front of Kim, gets 3 calls the next day. Names matter. We think about the nursery. How are we going to decorate this? I'm guilty. My boy's nursery was sports themed and stars. My daughter has a pink wall in her room. It's mostly gray. I've done it too. As they become infants, what about the clothes that we buy? Have you ever gone to the store and tried to find gender-neutral clothing? I have my gender students actually do this. Go to the store and look at the clothes and tell me what you find. It's hard. And even the stuff that is those lighter colors tends to have something gender specific on it.
Whenever they're infants, it's not as easy, but I was reading this parenting book and it says that it also put a reference to Princess Boy, and it says why not let your kids pick out their own clothes and don't make any specific bringing them to the boy section and the girl section.
Absolutely. What's really interesting, there's been a story floating on Facebook of a little boy who wore a princess gown to a birthday party.
Yeah.
The kids didn't care, it was just the adults.
Yeah, I mean, adults tease the dad for it.
Yeah, of course, is exactly right. It's hard though to stay totally neutral. It's hard to just get those colors. What colors do you think of when you think totally gender neutral?
Yellow.
Yellow? Do you
Black.
have black? Gosh, baby.
I think that any color can be gender neutral.
Interestingly enough, in history, it used to be that young children wore pink, regardless of whether they were boys or girls. Pink was just a baby color. It wasn't always pink for girls, blue for boys. We tend to think that way. Green can go either way. White. Purple should be able to go either way. It's one of Clay's favorite colors right now. But it's hard. It's hard. And when you have a little girl, you get kind of mad when people call her a boy. And so you do want to stick things on there, like the big old bows on their head that once they're old enough, they will pull them out and make you feel sorry you ever did it. It's hard to even start before they're here in neutral, much less once they get here. In infancy, the clothing, the accessories. What about the toys? What do the toys look like that we buy our kids? How are they marketed? Have you gone to the toy store? Now in our country, there's been a push to change this. Overseas, Sweden, England's been changing this. Toy stores are starting to separate the boy-girl sections and just mix them up. We had to have a campaign to get an easy bake oven that wasn't pink. I mean, there was a little girl whose brother wanted an easy bake oven, and all they have are pink options. And he's like, what if a boy wants to play it and doesn't want pink?
Isn't that funny? Because men get the status of chef,
Yes!
but the easy bake oven.
It's really bizarre because even thinking of that, little boys having kitchens to play with, like I've seen parents who have people freak out on them because their little boy has a kitchen. I'm like, hello, Bobby Flay has had a show on the Food Network since the dawn of time, literally.
With everyone being horrified as one gender being mistaken for another, doesn't it kind of say that I don't want my child to be girly because girly is a shameful thing?
Yes, that is exactly what you're really thinking about. If we're so scared of being mistaken for a girl, what does that say about our value for girls? That's absolutely it. Even marketing our toys, there's a difference. Boys' toys, they're violent, they're car-based. Legos. The Lego debate gets interesting because there's regular Legos and then there's the Friends Legos that are geared towards girls. I used to be very anti the Friends Legos. I've kind of changed my tune a little bit, having a little girl who loves the colors pink and purple. But if she's allowed to pick them out, she will go for those. If not, she'll play with her brother. She doesn't care. She loves pretending she's Darth Vader, as she calls him. It's really interesting how we feel the need that everything for a girl has to be pink or purple, everything for a boy has to be blue.
They did a study in boys who were non-influenced by things like that preferred girls' toys only because they were more colorful and looked more interesting.
I think that's a really good point. Girls' toys are more colorful. What's interesting also is a lot of how you deal with this influences your child's development of their sense of gender. I had a book once that said a child should know gender by 2. And I thought, well, that seems bizarre. That doesn't make much sense to me. And then I started thinking what was wrong with my kids because they were not getting it. Grace thinks everyone's a girl, still to this day. In fact, they had a discussion in the car the other night. Her and Clay were yelling at each other. Kay, you're a girl. No, I'm a boy. You're a girl. They don't know. Clay didn't either. And what I started finding when I did research, parents who have the strictest sense of gender roles for their children, who emphasize gender differences, but by the age of 18 months, you'll see kids being able to differentiate boy and girl. Parents who don't force that, it's often 3 or 4 before they start getting better at differentiating between male and female. And I was wondering, why is my child, I mean, I know he's got some issues, but I'm like, why is he not getting this? Because we didn't care. Because he had pink shirts and he had pink plates that he liked. It didn't matter.
What are the benefits of a child being able to identify gender? Like, why is it an important thing?
I'm not really sure there's a good answer to that. It is one of the first ways we start to classify people because it's so blatantly obvious to us. And from a cognitive standpoint, the ability to classify things is important for our cognitive resources. But just from a survival standpoint, if we think of evolutionary psych, the ability to recognize a female would be the ability to recognize someone who was a nurturer and caregiver and someone you could go to if you needed help. But genetically, we think about neurology, and I do because I'm doing cognition. The only noted difference between males and females that seems to exist is in visual spatial manipulation. Boys do score consistently better in visual spatial manipulation than girls. But the idea of, the math and English differences, they're not there. They don't exist. The data conclusively has shown that time and time again. Yet, we still spit them out. By 4th grade, we have boys showing higher self-confidence in their math abilities. By 5th grade, girls think boys are better at math. By 5th grade, that's pretty young. We've got to do something to address this. One of the things that we've seen is a big focus on STEM. If you do not know what STEM is, you should because the acronym is everywhere. Science, technology, engineering, and math. As we get into junior high and high school, as we start getting the ability to have more control over the classes we take, what we see is a difference where males and females go. Males tend to be much more heavy into science, technology, engineering, and math than females. And when females do go into this area, especially say science and technology, they head more towards the social areas. Like what I'm doing, social psychology. Psychology, more social. Males tend to stay in the more hard science areas, female, more socially oriented. Starting in 5th grade, they see themselves differently. Starting in 5th grade, girls think boys are better. There's tons of research on stereotype threat. and how females consistently will do poor on math tests, especially if someone bothers to point out to them first that girls typically don't do as well as boys. Their scores will drop. And it starts here. 42% of females and 36% of males between the ages of 18 and 24 in college. So, yeah, a decent percentage of us go. Here's where females matter. 62% of associate degrees, 58% of bachelor, master's degrees, 52% of doctoral degrees go to females. What does this mean? We're more educated than the males. So when we go back to those statistics, where a very small percentage of females are in leadership roles, you mean to tell me they found the one little bitty percentage of females who's less educated than the males in all these positions? I don't think so. Sure, probably some of them are. But we're the more educated sex. We're going to school more. Here's some of where our majors fall. Females are now more likely to be accounting majors, biological and biomedical science majors, males far and away computer majors, huge percentage of males in engineering. Females tend to dominate elementary education and teaching. In my son's first preschool, there were no males. At his second preschool, there was one. Dr. Malcolm, who's here now in the education department, he was a preschool teacher. We don't see males. This is an age where they could use them. Like, gosh, Mr. Gary was absolutely loved at play school. He was the only guy. They don't have these role models at a young age. Social sciences is kind of the flip. Females dominate psychology. Males are actually really behind in nursing as well. We don't see male nurses as much. We assume if it's a male, it's a doctor, and if it's a female, it's a nurse. We're even picking different majors in school. So how in the world do all these things relate to parenting? Because that's what we hear about, right? It's like, well, what does all this matter? As parents, we play a very pivotal role in the development of our child's gender. Their gender schema, their own sense of being male or female, starts picking up at around the age of 2, but it's very materialistically based. A 2-year-old's idea of gender will come back to if you look like what they think a boy or girl should look like, i.e. if you have long hair, they're going to think you're a girl. If you have short hair, they're going to think you're a boy. I showed a great video, I should have brought it up, of a little girl, she's like 4 or 5, and there's a Barbie and a Ken doll, and she identifies them as male or female. And the researcher takes Barbie's purse, the little girl calls it pocketbook, and moves it to Ken, and she's like, now Ken's a girl. Why? Because that's all they care about. If you don't bother to tell them what the differences are, that's as far as it's going to go. We start with their name. When we name our children, we are already setting them down a role. Now my kids have 2 very, Clay is clearly a male name, Grace is a feminine name. I don't care, it's okay. If we pick gender neutral names, it freaks people out. Nothing freaks people out more than not being able to tell if someone's male or female. I've done it myself. My sister called me once, she's a nurse. We cannot tell if this person's male or female. I was like, look for the Adam's apple. They weren't sure how to dress the person as Mr. Mr. You know, it's like, how do you do that? I was like, look for an Adam's apple. They never did find it out.
My little brother's name is Stacy, and he has long hair, and everyone constantly chastises my father and says, you're making him gay. Because he's allowed to wear pink, and he went as the archer from the Brave movie for the last, because he has red hair, so he went as the archer. Yeah.
Awesome. That brings me to a good question. What percentage of the population is gay? Anyone know?
30.
That's what most people guess. Like 30%.
I'm being,
It's 3. It's
Yeah.
3%, which is approximately the same percentage you see in the animal kingdom. I kid you not, there are gay elephants. It's been documented. Homosexual behavior shows up in almost every animal species at about 3%, the same as it does humans. People freak out that if you put a boy in pink, he's going to turn gay. Well, if you think of all the boys that have been put in pink, and then how many of them would identify themselves as gay or bisexual, you're not hitting like they don't match. But that's exactly it. If you don't give your kid a very specific male or female name, oh, the horror. When we think about the clothes that we buy them, My nephew wore pink. He wore some of Grace's stuff. Grace wore some of his. They didn't care. The baby, who cares? Well, if you take them out in public, people care. We start with that. What about the expectations we set on our kids? If you see, we had my daughter and nephew come in here. Braylon turns 3 at the end of the week. Grace is 2.5. They're going to both run around. They're both going to be wild. There will probably be pushing, shoving, biting, and hair pulling, just so you know. People will excuse that behavior in him before they will in her. We take a boy and a little girl acting the same way. The little boy is being the way he's supposed to. Boys are rambunctious. Boys don't really listen. They're not compliant. Little girls are supposed to be quiet and docile and sit and listen. You're more likely to get on the little girl than the little boy. Or at least get more exasperated with her, because you kind of expect it with him. But we see the little girl doing this, like, she's so bad. We have to catch ourselves. I've done it before. I had to even stop myself. They're just being who they are. Our expectation of them is based on what we as parents expect from them being male or female. They're just being who they are, with no sense of male or female whatsoever. They're just running around. Fathers already play more roughly with their boys than they do their girls from a young age. We see this. I forget what's next up there. Daughters are expected to do more chores. There's different rules for sons and daughters. Having the little girl who's rambunctious and is right in there with the boys, I've heard more than once people say, be gentle with her, she's a girl. Even spitting out something like that, we don't think about, but we're putting in a child's head, okay, she's a girl, we play differently with her. Now, my house is, you start it, you better be able to finish it. That's the rule. I tell Grace. She does something to play, he does it back, you started it, you finish it. Don't do something if you can't handle getting it done back to you. And if we're out, I'm like, she's fine. Unless Braylon is like, ripping her hair out, and that's just a totally different thing, it has nothing to do with gender, I'll leave it alone. Because I don't really see the point of making her some docile little creature that can't be broken just because she's a female.
There was a study, and a lot of people like to say girls are more sensitive because there's depression. And then this philosopher said, or not philosopher, a psychologist said that it could have something to do with the gender roles, the double standards, and the fact that the media is more harsh on females than it is males.
Absolutely, and a lot of the research in depression does bring up the fact that while there's certainly biochemistry involved, a lot of the expectations that are put on females, starting in the middle school years, where there's a lot of strain over what you feel like you should be, what you're not supposed to be, things contradicting, and that's where you start to see real depression issues. Absolutely. I do not believe in totally gender-neutral parenting. I think it's probably a bad idea, because the people who do it so gender-neutrally, there's a couple who have not told anyone the gender of their kid. This kid's like 3. I'm not sure that's the best idea. But the big thing lately has been the label Bossy with, where did her, help me?
Beyonce.
No, not that one though.
Which one?
Sheryl Sandberg?
Yes, thank you, Sheryl Sandberg. And the
Yes,
whole
yes.
ban Bossy versus not banning Bossy, and some
Yes.
people complain there's just something else for girls to complain about. And
Yeah.
I heard a really good follow-up to this. Sheryl Sandberg works for Facebook. She's the author of Lean In. She's one of the most powerful female businesswomen in our country in a very male-dominated world. And she has written a book called Lean In, which I have not read yet because I just don't have time to read. Really kind of addressing some of these issues. How do we get females here? Some people agree with her, some people say she's going about it wrong, whatever. The whole bossy idea is that we are labeling behavior in girls bossy that we would not label that way in boys. And there are people who are like, well, that's not true. Well, yeah, it kind of is. That's not to say we won't label boys as bossy, but we're more quick to do it as females. Now, the rebuttal I saw was very good, and it pointed out that banning bossy may not be the right approach, because there is being assertive, and then there's being bossy. And her idea was more that we take ownership and encourage assertiveness while still keeping the bossiness on track. Because there is a difference between bossing people around and taking a leadership position. But she also made the point that if we do that, it has to be for both males and females. That we have to point out bossy behaviors in our sons as well, and not just excuse it as being, he's a boy, which we do.
There's an argument, and that's why, like, with a lot of people who claim to be feminists, I'm a little reluctant to try and understand what it means, because there's a lot of propaganda going around, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems like it could be that people who try and prevent their little girl from being a girl are being just as oppressive as people who try and prevent their sons from being girls.
That's exactly where I felt I was. And one of the things that kind of changed my mind was an episode of How I Met Your Mother. If you've had class with me, which some of you have, you know that I love to use television shows. I show Big Bang Theory and How I Met Your Mother in class. There's a really good episode where Marshall and Lily are back together. It's their first Christmas back together since they split up, and he's trying to find the perfect Christmas gift for her. And Ted says, get her an easy bake oven. Lily always wanted an easy bake oven as a child, but her feminist mother wouldn't let her have one because she felt it was conforming her to the gender role. And that's where I was with Grace and the Princesses. I can't get Grace the Princesses. It's going to conform her to the gender role that she has to be this way and blah, 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 blah. And then I started to think about it. Well, what's wrong with a girl liking princesses? Who cares? Who cares if a little girl wants to bake cookies? My gosh. Who cares if a little girl wants to get out a hammer or run around with a lightsaber saying she's Darth Vader and she's going to get you? You can take it too far. And I think that's the problem that we can see people run into. Being a feminist is about equal opportunity. It's not about not allowing your child to play with certain things. It's about not pushing them into something or restricting them. Which is why, even though I have some issue with high heels, my daughter has a pair of toy high heels. She runs around and she thinks it's great. I still am, I don't know on that line, but at the same time, she just does it because, mommy wears them occasionally. I think it's a really good point. We can take it too far.
Yeah, and it's kind of difficult because people will say women should be free to express themselves and things like that, but then they'll say if you dress revealing, then that's, you're degrading yourself and you're putting a bad name to women and things like that.
It gets really complicated, doesn't it?
I think that slut shaming is a little ridiculous because the way you dress does not denote how many sexual partners you have.
Absolutely. We have different standards for
and
males
men
and
can
females
walk
too.
around like practically naked and it's not a big deal. So.
I think you make a really good point. When we start to expect different things, or we start to say, you can't do this because you're a girl, that's really defeating the purpose. You're just doing it from the other perspective. And let's all face it, when you're told you can't do something, what do you want to do?
You want to do it.
That exact thing. It might even be counterproductive. That'd be really interesting to study. People have different rules. People will allow their sons to go out at night, but not their daughters. My thought is this. A female, in the vast majority of cases, can only get pregnant once. You can get pregnant while you're pregnant, but it doesn't happen that often. A male can impregnate 900 people.
You should have had this conversation with my parents, because my parents were very much of the parenting mindset that we lock the girls in the tower for their safety. And I was the most uptight young person ever. I was so well behaved. I never did anything. There was no risk. And my brother was a very normal teenage boy, but he could run wild.
Yeah, I don't get it, because it's like boys can get into more trouble. Boys do get into more trouble. Boys make poor decisions. My thought is this. I would rather, now, Clay is going to be, with him having the Asperger, if you've ever seen Big Bang Theory, my son is a lot like Sheldon Cooper. For better or for worse, that is what I live with every day. Grace is an extremely social person at this age. We will have to treat them differently. And by the way, I'm not advocating that you treat your kids the exact same, because I think that's bad parenting. You have to know who your children are and respond accordingly, but you don't put different expectations on them. There's where the difference is. Grace is going to have some different roles. She just is. She's going to be our troublemaker. She's going to be causing problems. We will have to deal with it. But I'm like, send a girl out with a stiletto heel. She will be fine. Do you know what a girl can do with a stiletto heel? A lot of bodily damage. But that's the part I've always had issue with. Boys get into trouble too. They can get into more trouble. They can cause more babies at one time than a female can have.
They're more prone to risk behaviors and.
It's so baffling to me that people were like, oh, our boys can do whatever. I'm like, nah, counterproductive. As we get older, as we get into middle, junior high, high school, there's research that does support that same-sex learning environments benefit females. And I think that's and actually they've been showing it to have benefits for males too. Louisville has a couple of same-sex male classes in their school system and they do well. And I think that's a whole different debate, but from a young age, less seclusion would definitely, I think, benefit that idea. And I think that's why with my nephew and Grace, there is no sense of, oh, he can't, if he puts on something to Grace's, we don't care. He sucked on a pink pacifier and she plays with his Jake and the Pirates hat. I mean, there's no sense of, what does it matter? Because what does it matter? That's the real question. What does it matter? When we think about the way the media is geared towards males or females, the unfortunate answer here, the unfortunateness is, rather than taking what we're doing to females and stopping it, we're taking what we do to females and doing it to males. Male eating disorders are really starting to rise that we know of. It used to be that we knew about 10% of eating disorders were male. Of course, that means there's plenty we don't know. It's growing. We watched in one of my development classes, there's a Dove has one of the videos showing all the Photoshop. They do it to the males too. They even removed this male's nipple and changed it. I was like, what? You guys probably saw the picture from Target over the weekend where Target did some photoshopping. They made one of the model, her arm was like down to her knee. On one hand, she was missing fingers, and where they tried to cut the thigh gap, they took part of the vaginal area as well. There's just like a big arch there.
Kind of disturbing.
It was
These
disturbing.
things make it depressed. I don't understand.
It wasn't just that. She was missing fingers. And no one's arm looks like that.
Like when you see some Photoshop things, there will be like a hand on the shoulder.
Or like a missing leg, random leg sticking out. What does that tell us?
It's synthetic and it's actually quite creepy when you look at it. Like I've looked at some females and they have looked structurally unsound because of the way that they've been photoshopped.
Right.
Like their
It's
waist.
like you would fall.
It's like Barbie.
Yeah.
If Barbie were human,
It's like
she would not.
objectification. I mean, can you get to making people into objects more than disembodying them and rearranging their parts?
And a lot of this, again, it comes back to parenting because as parents, we start setting examples. We can see these things. Are we having conversations with our sons and daughters? That's not really what girls look like. That's not really what boys look like. Are we buying our kids? Target now has a sports bra in the toddler section.
What?
I have not seen it, I've just seen the article. And I'm sitting here thinking now, if my daughter were to see this, there's an entire possibility she would want it because it's a bra and big girls have bras. But at the same time,
We have to conceal 3-year-old nipples? I mean,
people put them on Facebook, I do not. At this point in time, when I take pictures of Grace, like when she puts on a tutu and a hat and I think it's cute, I say turn around. And I get the picture from the back so we're not exposing the things because it gets to a point, in my opinion, it just gets too old. But that's exactly it.
well,
It's
right.
free.
I wasn't critiquing
No,
any
but-
decision you're making because the culture is sexualizing.
That's
young
exactly
girls.
it. That's exactly it. And this little bra, which could be just a simple little girl pretending to be her mom, gets made into something else. But we're buying it for them.
Or putting a bikini on a 1-year-old.
My daughter has had 2 pieces that cover everything, including having sleeves.
Right.
We have not done the traditional bikini because I'm like, you're 2.5. Do we need it? Dance. My daughter's in dance. There's several dance studios where we live. And I purposefully chose the one that does a very traditional approach where they're not really doing competition and they're not doing all the hair and makeup, but you guys have seen it. Kids as young as literally my daughter's age and like extremely short, revealing outfits, lots of makeup, big hair. The argument for a dancer, well, they need less clothing to help them move. They make tights and leotards. Can a 3-year-old not just wear tights and a leotard and do the same message as having extremely short shorts and, you know, a bra top on? And yeah, that you do get into the whole idea of the sexuality there, but we don't want to sexualize our kids at 3. And if we're doing that, what are we teaching our girls? That you're a sexual being first and foremost, that you are meant to be valued by your sex appeal and nothing else. Once you have kids, you realize the complexity of it all.
Yeah.
You do. And really the only way to hit, you start talking about things when they're very little. You have to think about what you're saying and doing when they're very little. And that's when you have the most impact, and that's typically when we don't think about it. But that's where it starts. The idea of giving a sex ed talk used to freak me out, and I do these in development. And anyone who's had development recently would be like, that freaks you out. It made me uncomfortable and nervous. And now I will just tell you everything that you need to be concerned with, because that's more important. And I've kind of gotten over it. As a parent, it has to get over it. You have to get over the fact that you need to sit down and talk to your children about this. With things like rape culture, as parents, we're sitting here thinking about what do we do to our girls and how are we exposing our girls. When we only focus this on girls, we have missed half the population, and quite frankly, we've probably missed a bigger chance to have an impact.
It doesn't mean, like, denote sex as a bad thing. It simply means you need to educate your children on what signs there are in a sexual predator. Like,
Yes.
like you should be free to make your own sexual advances with people, but you need to know, like, where to draw the line.
Yes.
And so on and so forth.
And we need more emphasis on this with our males. We need to teach our males from a young age that females have something to be valued that is not just a physical body. Our males do not need to be told from a young age that pink is for girls. Clay's
My favorite color is pink.
My
Don't
son
even get
loves
me started
purple.
on that.
My son's favorite is purple right now. He loves all the colors in the rainbow, but purple's one of his favorite. You know, he's 6, he's in kindergarten, and they're starting to do the, ew, that's for girls, or, you know, whatever. And I'm like, everybody can do it. And that's all I tell him. And I don't really get on him more than that because he's 6. And yelling at him serves no purpose. But just me telling him, you know, boys and girls can do that. That's not just for boys, or that's not just for girls. That's what he needs to hear. In fact, we even had a conversation once about how lipstick could be for boys or girls, because I made the comment that girls wear lipstick, and then I felt that was too confining. And I'm like, well, boys can wear lipstick too. And my husband's like, they're called emo. And it was just, he was like 4. And I felt so bad about putting this label on the lipstick. That was probably a little extreme, but I think that's where we have to take our focus is with boys. And I don't think we do a good enough job. They need to hear that females are just as smart. They need to hear that females are capable. They need to know females can make their own decisions. Because let's face it, they're the ones making the decisions for us. Well, I'll show a slide here in a second that'll really
It's like
explain.
8 till 1, just
8 till-
just give me a heads up.
This is a good one to know. Women make up 50.8% of our U.S. population. We rank 78th in the world for female representation in our government. We have 82 women in the House, 20 in the Senate, 18 and 22%. We make up half the population. We have very little impact on the laws that affect us.
This is a U.S. study?
This is
This
from,
is right now.
this was published Friday. These are the statistics from Friday that was just released by the government. Yeah, that's where we are.
From a cultural standpoint, a lot of people think that I am the way that I am because my father raised me to be that way, because I'm not from here, actually. I'm from Germany. And a lot of people think, oh, Germans are the toughest people. And we're pretty tough, but like there's not a lot of discrimination.
It's the language. You just
Yeah.
sound. I love the sound of the German language.
Because,
She's great.
because it's like, my dad never told me anything, like he never even called me his daughter, because there's not a real word for daughter. It's just, there's a lot of gender neutral language there, and there's a lot more options to be gender neutral. You introduce someone as your child or your partner. You don't say girlfriend and boyfriend here seem really childish.
They really do. I would agree with that.
But I don't identify as a female. I'm genderqueer. Like, I feel like there's lots of things that could classify me as a more masculine person than a lot of the females here, and then I like to wear dresses and things like that, but that doesn't make me a girl.
But we try to put you in a box, and if
Yeah.
you don't fit, it bothers us. Nini, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just saying, I was just thinking about the word love. Like, I'm wondering what you guys think about the word love.
I think that it's misused here. Like in Germany, the word, or the
Because
phrase.
in my culture, the word love doesn't exist. Like, it's
And
not,
you're
Yeah.
from?
it's not even there. Like,
Tell us where you're from again.
I'm from Kenya.
Yeah.
So it's like, because you know how you tell your parents, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
You tell your dad, I love you. Like, for me, when I go home, it's like I can't say I love you to my parents. And
That's true.
they never told me I love you. So I was like, I learned love stuff, like when I got here, like people telling their parents I love you, and I'm like, you know.
It's a culture
So-
thing.
Yeah, in
I
Germany,
never thought about
the
it.
phrase "Ich liebe dich" is only romantic because it means I'm thirsty for you. And there's like, I trust you. You don't say that to your parents, obviously. And so there's
That's it?
not
I like
an
that.
overarching love. There's different kinds of I trust you, or you say exactly what you mean. Love, like, you can say, I trust you, I want to be with you forever. You can say any of those things, but like there's no word that means that. You have to say specifically what you mean, and you have to show different ways of appreciation other than just like a word that can mean anything.
Love is part of an unspoken neurological communication. Yes.
Here's a few, I want to give you all these before you have to leave. What's really sad is that there's lots of websites to empower girls. Lots of them. A Mighty Girl is one I've been following. They have a page on Facebook. I've been following them. They're about a little over a year old now. They're fantastic because they put out books, toys, resources for empowering girls. You can get superhero panties through them, which may not seem like a big deal. They sell out all the time. Little boys can get Superman underwear and you don't give it a second thought. Little girls are stuck with like Dora the Princesses, which, you know. I mean, not that there's nothing wrong with Dora and the Princesses, but what if you want Wonder Girl underwear?
I can give you some male resources
Good.
in the form of books, like the
Right.
Princess Boy is a really good one.
There are good resources out there, but there's not a really good super website. Amy Poehler's Smart Girls is a good one. Girls Inc. is really the first. These are two good documentaries. Misrepresentation is a really good one if you haven't seen it, on really the way females are presented and projected. When we talk about politics, in Texas, they were talking with some of the legislators. This is not a Republican-Democrat thing, by the way. It is not.
There's,
And there are differences, but it's not a difference. In Texas, when the girls talk, they'll cat call. They don't do that when the men do it. They have very few restrooms in Washington for the women.
huh?
They don't have nearly as many restrooms.
There was a picture.
Fewer toilets. Like,
Yeah.
seriously.
Did you see?
They didn't even add, I don't think they even had one for females till the 50s.
Did you see the
Weird,
thing in
isn't
the
it?
newspaper? And it was a illustration. It was technically political, I guess. And it had a men's bathroom, and it was a square, and then it had a women's bathroom, and it was in the complete shape of a woman. And it's like, you get it, because like it's like saying that if you confine someone to that, like it's just, you know, and then men have a lot more leeway and things like that. But they're just now having, I think unisex bathrooms are a good idea. And I walk into the men's bathroom intentionally because like there's no law saying that I can't.
Well, and you see more family bathrooms. For males, this documentary's not out yet. It's coming. It's from the woman who did Misrepresentation, The Mask You Live In. One of the things that the promos have addressed is the phrase, be a man, which I hate. Be a man, man up.
I don't like it when people tell me that.
I heard a guy tell his 7-year-old son to be a man because the kid did not want to go swimming in the deep end. And I wanted to jump out of the pool and be like, what are you doing?
Would you ever force your girl to do that? If she was scared?
No.
No.
I take that back. Possibly, but no differently than I would treat her brother. Maybe that's the way to put it. I wouldn't treat her differently than I would Clay.